in the Quran, Surah 21, verses 30. So this verse, we see that water is pointed out as the origin of life. All living things are made up of cells, and we now know that cells are mostly made up of water. For example, 80% of cytoplasm, which are the basic cell materials of a standard animal cell, is described as water in biology textbooks. Now, the fact that living things consist mostly of water was discovered only after the invention of the microscope. In the deserts of Arabia, the last thing somebody would have guessed is that life came from water. There's also a surprising claim at number 9 about iron. So iron apparently is unnatural to Earth, and it did not form on the Earth but actually came down from outer space. This is according to many scientists who believe that billions of years ago the Earth was actually struck by meteorites, and now these meteorites were actually carrying iron from distant stars that had exploded, and they landed into Earth, and then we had iron. Now in the Quran, it has this to say about iron. We sent down iron with its great inherent strength and its many benefits for humankind. And you can find that in the Quran, Surah 57, verses 25. So the Quran uses the word sent down for iron. So this verse points that iron is not an earthly material, but was sent down for the benefit of humankind. Now the fact that iron came down to Earth from outer space is something which could not be known by the science of the 7th century.
The giant body crashed into the center of the planet and gave Earth its iron core.
Sky's protection comes in at number 8. Now the sky plays a very important role in protecting the Earth. The sky protects the Earth from the lethal rays of the sun. If the sky did not exist, then the sun's radiation would have killed all life on Earth. So pretty much the sky acts like a blanket wrapped around the Earth to protect it from the freezing cold of space. Now the Quran asks people to consider and ponder upon the sky in the following verse. We made the sky a protective ceiling, and yet they are turning away from our signs. And you can find that in the Quran, Surah 21, verse is 32. Now the protective properties of the sky were discovered by scientific research conducted in the 20th century.
The sky protects the Earth from the lethal rays of the sun. If the sky did not exist, then the sun's radiation would have killed off all life on Earth.
Another surprising thing mentioned in the Quran at number 7 is the mountains. Now the Quran points our attention to a very important characteristic about mountains. And the verse goes as follows. Did we not make the earth a resting place and the mountains as stakes? And that passage, by the way, is taken from the Quran, Surah 78, verses 6 to 7. So the Quran indicates that mountains have deep roots by using the word stakes to describe them. Now, in fact, mountains do have deep roots, and the word stakes is a very accurate description for them. Now, there's a book entitled Earth by geophysicist Frank Press, and he explains that mountains are like stakes and are buried deep under the surface of the earth. Mount Everest, the height of which is approximately 9 kilometers above the ground, has a root deeper than 125 kilometers. Now the fact that mountains have deep stake-like roots was not known until after the development of the theory of plate tectonics in the beginning of the 20th century. Number 6 brings us the expansion of the universe. Now, at a time when science and astronomy was still primitive, the expansion of the universe was described actually in the Quran. And in the Quran, Surah 51, verse 47, it says, "And it is we who have built the universe with our creative power and keep expanding it." Now, the fact that the universe is expanding was discovered in the last century. Now, the physicist Stephen Hawking, in his book, A Brief History of Time, writes, "The discovery that the universe is expanding was one of the great intellectual revolutions of the 20th century."
Astronomers think that the universe appears to be expanding at an accelerating rate.
Alright guys, so far we just looked at 5 surprising things mentioned in the Quran. I have 5 more to go, but if you guys are enjoying this so far, be sure to leave a like on this episode. This lets us know which FTD Facts videos that you want to see more of. And by the way, if this is your first time here to this channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button and ring that bell. That way you'll be notified of our daily episodes. I definitely don't want you to miss any of them because we teach you something new every single day. Okay, so with that said, let's continue with this episode. At number 5, we have the sun's orbit. That's also mentioned in the Quran. So back in the year 1512 AD, the astronomer Nicholas Copernicus put forward his theory that the sun is motionless at the center of the solar system and that the planets revolve around it. Now, the belief that the sun is stationary was widespread amongst astronomers until the 20th century. It is now a well-established scientific fact that the sun is actually not stationary, but it's moving in an orbit around the center of our Milky Way galaxy. Now, the Quran actually mentions the orbit of the sun, and it goes as follows. It is he who created night and day, the sun and the moon, each floating in its orbit. And you can find that in Surah 21, verses 33.
It was Galileo Galilei who in 1612 observed sunspots moving across the sun's disk over time, therefore confirming the sun's rotation.
We have at number 4 an interesting mention of embryology. So check this out. This passage goes as follows. We created man from an extract of clay. Then we made him as a drop into a place of settlement, firmly fixed. Then we made the drop into an alaka. And that word, by the way, means leech, suspended thing, and blood clot. And then the passage continues as follows. Then we made the alaka into mudga, which is a chewed substance. And that is found in the Quran, Surah 23, verses 12 to 24. Now, Professor Emeritus Keith L. Moore, he's one of the world's most prominent scientists in the field of anatomy and embryology. He said this: "It's clear to me that these statements must have come to Muhammad from God, because almost all of this knowledge was not discovered until many centuries later." At number 3, we have the seas and oceans. Modern science has discovered that in the places where two different seas meet, there's actually a barrier between them. I found this really fascinating. Now, this barrier divides two seas so that each sea has its own temperature, salinity, as well as its density. And there's a pretty surprising passage in the Quran that goes as follows. He has set free the two seas meeting together. There is a barrier between them. They do not transgress. And that's in Surah 55, verses 19 to 20. Moving on now to number 2. We got 2 surprising things left to talk about. But number 2, we have skin pain receptors. For a long time, it was thought that the sense of feeling and pain was actually dependent on the brain. However, it's been discovered that there are pain receptors present in the skin. Without these pain receptors, a person would not even be able to feel pain anyways. Now, in the Quran, it says, "We shall send those who reject our revelations to the hellfire. When their skins have been burnt away, we shall replace them with new ones that they may continue to feel the pain. God is almighty, all-wise." And that's in Surah 4, verses 56. Now, in this episode, we've come to number 1, and we're going to be talking about lying and the frontal lobe. Now, there's actually a book titled Essentials of Anatomy and Physiology, which includes the results of research on the functions of this area, and it states, "The motivation and the foresight to plan and initiate movements occur in the anterior portion of the frontal lobes, the prefrontal area. The part of the brain that is responsible for movement is said to be seized if the man does not stop. Secondly, numerous studies have shown that the same region, the frontal lobe, is responsible for the lying function of the brain." There was, by the way, a very cruel and oppressive tribal leader known as Abu Jahl, who lived during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, and in the verses of the Quran, they read as followed. "No, indeed, if he does not stop, we will seize him by his forehead, his lying, sinful forehead." And you can find that in the Quran 96, verses 15 to 16. So as you can see there, Muslims point out that the Quran does not call this person a liar, but calls his forehead, the frontal part of the brain, lying and sinful, and warns him to stop. And just like that, guys, we've wrapped up another episode here on FTD Facts. Those are